All right. Well, Steve, it is really good to finally meet you. Welcome to
Yeah,
the first episode of Kicking Tables for 2022. You are our first guest. We took
nice.
took a bit of a hiatus there, but we are back, and we're here to talk to you
Excellent.
about Earth Under Siege Flashpoint. So before we jump in, Steve, why don't you tell us what the game is all about?
Well, Earth Under Siege is at its core, it's a dungeon crawling game, but really it's a covert mission based game. Um, you play a group of operatives that are striking back against an invading alien force, and they have superior technology and they have superior abilities. So, as players, you rely on stealth and sabotage and espionage in order to accomplish your missions. There's a lot of thematic action. If any covert movies you've ever seen,
Mm-hmm.
or like special forces, there's a lot of those elements in there. You cutting the power, crawling through ventilation shafts, using silenced weapons, night vision goggles, that kind of stuff. It's very thematic, and it's all about completing these missions without hopefully triggering the alarm. Once the alarm gets triggered, things get very, very hard.
Okay.
At its core, it's a covert mission campaign game. Your characters do evolve over time,
Awesome.
and
Awesome.
not only do you build your operatives, you also build your HQ in between missions, improving your various base divisions and gaining new abilities and there's a ton of upgrades in the game.
Wow. So what's a typical round of the game look like when you sit down to play? What are you doing each turn?
Okay, so at the beginning of every round is the refresh phase, and that's where everybody kind of refills their hand of cards, refreshes their gear cards, and refreshes their action tokens. At the end of that round, at the end of that phase, there is a threat step where you draw a threat card, which is kind of like an event.
Okay.
Usually something bad happens, and then you deal with it. And then you go to the operative phase, which is where you take all of your actions as players. And you can take them in any order you choose. There's no set turn order, and you don't have to take all of your actions at once. You can take one action, then one of your teammates could take an action, and you
Okay.
go back and forth until everybody has taken all the actions they want to take or all the actions they can take.
Okay.
And how it works is you have six action tokens, three movement tokens, and three order tokens. Um, you can use all six of them in one round. However, during the refresh phase, you only recover three. So if you really
Oh,
exert
okay.
yourself, yeah, you could be really kind of caught out where you're not at your full capabilities. But basically, you do that when you're in a bad situation. Like if we don't do this, the alarm's going to get triggered. So you push yourself. We got to
Yeah.
kill this guy.
So you're really
So
balancing out how many actions you want to take now versus save up for later.
right,
Okay.
exactly. And there are some elements in the game that give you more recovery. So you might get recover four action tokens in a round. There are also some penalties where you might recover only two because you were stunned or something. You perform a series of actions, like I said, and then once all the players are done, you go to the enemy phase. Now, the enemy phase moves generally pretty quickly if the alarm hasn't been triggered, because most enemies on the board don't move. They're not aware of you. They're just kind
Okay.
of hanging out, doing their daily job. There are other blips on the board, though, yellow patrol blips that do move around. They're just kind of looking around, looking for trouble. And as you engage in combat, as you engage in sabotage, you leave kind of a trail of investigate tokens behind you of little areas of concern for the enemy. And that's what
Okay.
those patrols move towards. They kind of like move towards the nearest investigate token. And when they reach it, that token goes up onto the escalation track as they slowly build awareness of you. If they ever have
Wow.
10 tokens up there, the alarm gets triggered. So they're just kind of moving around and looking for you, and you got to kind of manage that threat. Sometimes you might want to stay behind and ambush that patrol so they don't get to those tokens and put them up on the escalation track. So you ambush it. Um, and then, so if the alarm hasn't been triggered, that's mostly what happens in the enemy phase. It's just that any patrols will move.
Okay.
And then you go to the escalation step, which again, if the alarm hasn't been triggered, very little happens. You might have to spawn some the occasional enemy, but mostly it's just a cleanup phase. You're just going to clean up your ongoing effects and get ready for the next round.
Okay.
And that's a typical round.
That's
Okay.
cool. Very cool.
So I want to ask you about your theme. Where did you draw inspiration for this? Because just the idea, like what sort of sources, what sort of like any TV shows or movie stuff, what was sort of drew you towards this theme?
Well, it's kind of an odd thing. So I used to play this old game you guys never heard of. You're probably too young. It's this old miniature game that you guys remember the original FASA. They made BattleTech and Shadowrun and all that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made a miniature game, like kind of like a 40K style game called Vor the Maelstrom. I don't know if
Okay.
you.
I have not heard of that one.
They stopped making it 22 years ago, so it's an old game. But anyway, I was involved in the design of that and the writing, and I loved the game. I loved it. It was sci-fi based, and I've always had a thing for sci-fi in general. And it's hard to say where the idea came from exactly. It just kind of was there one day, just kind of like this campaign-based, stealth-based. Because when I started designing this game, there really were no stealth games out there.
Yeah.
And then came Reichbusters, and then came Assassin's Creed, and a couple others. I was like, oh man! Now all of a sudden, I went from there being really nothing out there to this being a crowded field. But what are you going to do? So.
I love stealth games. I tell you right now, that's my favorite type of game is stealth.
Yeah, and I said there really wasn't anything in that space, so I kind of wanted to do that. And so the idea spawned from that, and just kept building and building from there. And honestly, one of the things that kind of inspired the setting, and I didn't even realize it until later. Again, I'm going to show my age here, but the movie Independence Day, right?
Oh yes.
Yes,
Yep.
back in the 90s, I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
seeing it in the theater. It's not the greatest of movies, right? But it was fun.
It is
right?
a
It was a
fun
fun
movie.
right? But I remember very vividly sitting in the theater and watching it, and I'm thinking the aliens are attacking, and I'm like, man, this is when humanity comes together. Everybody fights together to repulse this alien threat. This is the kind of thing that humanity needs, something to bring us together, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't really do that in the movie. They just focused on the Americans, right? And I was
That's
very
true.
disappointed in that. I was like, they kind of talked about the other countries, but they didn't come together. They didn't team up.
I mean, it was called Independence Day. Let's be real.
Right, exactly. Yes. And I just remember being very disappointed that I felt like a lost opportunity to show them working with other countries and stuff. And that's what this setting is. It's soldiers and scientists from all over the globe coming together to form this organization called Aegis that is basically the last shield of humanity against extinction. So it's represented in the game like that. There's characters from all different countries, especially as you see more and more of the operatives. We haven't shown them all yet, but there's a diverse cast of characters to show all these nations coming together and just putting aside our differences, putting aside all our petty conflicts, and standing together against this common threat.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of standing together, it is a 1 to 4 players. So it's obviously co-op. But how different does it play, or does it play different at all if you just play it single player?
Well, it depends on how you want to play it. It's completely up to the player. You could play all 4 operatives
Okay.
by yourself, but I would never want to do that, because each operative has a hand of cards. I don't even like playing two-handed, let alone four-handed.
Goodness, yeah.
Right. So the different systems in this game to allow for different player counts, including solo play, is that number one, you can just play with less operatives if you want. You could try to true solo the game with just one operative. It would be very hard, but you could do it. And you could do some missions that might be easier, but that is one option. And the game does scale based on the number of operatives in the mission. Okay. So enemy health and certain effects all scale based on what's called the threat level. The threat level is set at the beginning of the mission based on the number of operatives. And the other factor is that each operative in the game has a squad member version, which is basically like an easier to play version of that character. It's on the reverse side of their dashboard. They have, instead of a deck of cards, they've got a printed skill on their dashboard that they get every round. And you also get what's called a support token, which is a token that it can be used once per round, and it boosts the entire team. And the more squad members you have on your team, the more powerful the token's effect is,
Okay.
because you need that extra power to make up for the fact that these characters have no decks. So playing that way with 4 operatives, 1 true operative with a deck, and then three squad members is very doable. I do that all the time.
Okay, awesome. That's cool. The game really kind of reminds me of XCOM, which is another favorite of mine.
Yep.
It's just got that turn-based, but it's stealth and strategy, and just you take a turn, then the enemies do. They're all on a grid type thing. It really kind of reminds me of that. Was that something you had in mind when you built it as well?
To a degree. I mean, I did play XCOM 2 a lot, but that's about the only XCOM I ever really played.
Right.
And I did like it, but I wasn't drawing too much inspiration for the gameplay out of that, really.
It just kind of reminds me of that kind of style. That's,
Yeah. The base building and everything, there is those elements in there.
Yeah, for sure.
So the campaign itself, how replayable will it be? Like, once you go through the 30 plus missions, if you go through again, is it going to feel different the second time through?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a branching stories in there. So like right after the very first mission, in the debriefing, they tell you you've learned these 2 things. Now you get to choose which of the 2 missions you want to go after. Do you want to rescue this captured scientist, or do you want to go and blow up this weapons lab? And each of those paths has lasting consequences. It will have rewards and consequences that are based solely on that path.
Okay.
And that's not the only path. You'll go on a few missions down that path, and then they'll meet at like mission 5, and then you'll get another choice where it branches again. And there are 2 different endings to the campaign based on your choices. There are 2 different bosses that you go after in the core box, and that will affect the expansion missions if you play those, which boss you basically leave alive.
Right. And will it affect the feel of the game depending on which operative you choose to play as?
Absolutely. All the operatives are very unique. They all have a tactics deck, which gives them all this, these unique abilities and this personality, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Every character plays very distinct. You'll definitely, playing Kyle the assassin feels very, very different than playing Olivia the scientist. It's very different play styles.
Okay, awesome.
Well, let's talk about the characters for a second, because your game is very full of minis. So full disclosure, I have a very personal, I've got a very good knowledge of all the minis. I've seen all
Yes,
of
you
them. They're fantastic minis. How important was it for you to have minis in this game? Because I mean, a game like this, you can just play with standees, you could play with tokens. Like, how important was it for you to have these fantastically detailed minis in your game?
Well, I mean, to me, it was very important. I mean, I basically made the game I want to play, and I love miniature games. I love, I've got a ton of them, and I love the gorgeous minis, and I just really, really, I mean, it was never an option to not have them for me.
Well, it's who designed them for you, because they're incredibly detailed.
Yeah, we've got a couple of different sculptors that we've used. We used Little Worlds Studios did a bunch of they did all the operatives,
Okay.
As well as some of the enemies, and then a sculptor named Marco Sassi did many of our enemy figures. And we did one figure which you didn't get to see, from a company called Baru Studios. So it's been a mix, and I think both Marco and Little World Studios really did great stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, kudos to them. Honestly, the minis are incredibly detailed and absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see the final product, because they're amazing.
Yeah, and hey, hand it out to the artist too. My Todd Ulrich, he's amazing, right? I mean, this guy is just kills it on our art. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever I describe to him, he nails it.
Yeah.
And those
visuals
sculptors
are beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, he just nails it every time. And the sculptors did an amazing job of taking his art and do it almost exactly, what he did. And I'm very happy with it all.
It's amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It sounds like an amazing game. I haven't seen the full game itself, but I cannot wait to see it. It sounds incredible.
You had touched on earlier expansion missions. Are there going to be expansions as part of your Kickstarter campaign?
Yep, there'll be a day one expansion offering where that will add 8 additional missions. Well, there's branching paths in there, so there's actually more than 8 missions.
Okay.
But it's you'll play 8, so there'll be a 20 mission total campaign missions, and then you had alluded to I had 30 missions, right? So how you get to the higher mission counts is that one of the things that you can do in the game, and this is completely optional, is there are enemy databases on most missions. And you can go and sabotage those, hack them, and steal their data. And then when you do that, during the HQ phase, you get to draw a special ops card. And special ops are shorter little mini missions that are designed to be played in about half the time, half the setup, and they play quick and they have great rewards. And there's a deck of those cards. So there's another way that it changes the way the game plays, because you're only going to get maybe 10 of these or so, throughout a campaign, and there's going to be like 30 of them. So you could play again and get completely different, different special ops.
Actually, while you're on the topic of the campaign and the missions, what's an example of an early mission? Like what are you doing in one of these missions that and I guess obviously you have a specific goal, so every time you play, the game ends in a different way.
So give us an example of one of the missions. What are you trying to do?
Sure. So say the first mission, this is the mission where humanity is finally fighting back. They have been on the defensive. The aliens basically came out of nowhere. We don't even know how they got here. There's no starships. There's no landing craft. They were just here, and they were just invading, and they seem to have help from this terrorist organization called the Vormok, and they are these humans that seem to be assisting the Zethan. So for basically the beginning of the whole war, humanity has just been reeling and trying to survive. And then this mission represents the first time humanity is striking back. So in this mission, you infiltrate a facility and you're going to assassinate one of their generals. It's called a war leader, and steal his decuments. One thing I wanted to point out that we didn't kind of touch on earlier, one of the things that the selling point of this game is that you get to approach these missions how you want to approach them. This game is not on rails. Like most dungeon crawlers, I feel like it's kind of very obvious what you do. You go to this room, then you go to this room, then you go to this room, then you fight the boss, and it's over.
Yes, absolutely.
In this game, the vast majority of the missions, you lay out the map, you read the objectives, and then players as a team decide the strategy they want to take. And there are 3 distinct strategies that you can take, and a card that comes with them that gives you special abilities and additional starting gear. Now, the 3 approaches are Black Op, which is all about stealth. You cut the power from the outside of the building. You go in with night vision goggles. You're very, very stealthy. It's all about being quiet. Then there's Breach and Clear, which is the opposite. You're literally kicking in doors and shooting people in the face. It's your special forces team going in and clearing a building.
So I'd be the first group, and Tico would be the second group.
I am not the quietest when it comes to stealth games. I go brute force almost every time.
Every time.
Yeah. Well, Breach and Clear would be your way to go then, because that's all about kicking in doors and shooting people in the face. It's and the last one is Espionage, and that is like all about sabotage and trickery and misdirection. And like I said, when you pick that strategy, you get a card. It grants you abilities, and you get additional starting gear. And you can also level up your strategy cards through your HQ, so your strategies become more and more evolved. Like for instance, when you go to level 2, the Black Op, instead of just cutting the power, you also have the option to halo into the mission, which parachute into the top of the building.
Oh, okay.
And and you can choose to start inside the ventilation shaft as opposed to starting at the insertion point. So like you might look at the map and go, you know what? It'd be really great if we could just pop right out of that vent instead of having to walk there. So let's just halo into this mission. So you get to look at the map and decide how you want to approach it.
So that's actually how the game will change each time you play as well, because
Yep, 'cause you can take a
that same one mission could be played 3 different ways.
Yep, you can take a different strategy every time. Yep.
Wow, so that turns your 30 missions into 90 missions. It's just
Right,
it's
and
just
then there's
huge.
going to be right, lots of different operatives to pick. So there's lots of you could play this multiple times,
Wow.
and I think and not get bored.
That's amazing. I do want to ask a little bit more about the
Mhm.
campaign. We always like to ask if there are any of the stretch goals that that are coming up that you might want to tease for us. Any of the cool ones that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. There's a bunch of operatives that I really hope we get to make because
Yeah.
I love their play styles and stuff. I mean, I can send you guys stuff that you guys can preview that stuff. But yeah, there's some great. There's a operative called Vector who is a science officer, but he's really specializes in counterintelligence. He's all about manipulating the enemy spawn decks and manipulating the patrol behaviors and that kind of stuff. He's my favorite. And there's a bunch of great enemies that I hope we get to unlock. Some really scary ones that look awesome. They look awesome on the board. They're terrifying, but they're really cool. So yeah, there's a bunch of great stretch goals that I'm hoping we get to, and we'll see how that goes.
That's amazing. Of course, the campaign comes on March 1st, so that's coming up
Mm-hmm.
very, very soon. Listen, Steve, we want to take a step away from your game for just a quick second, and
Sure.
we want to get to know you as a gamer. So we've got a bit of a lightning round set of questions for you. You ready for this? Just answer the first thing that comes to mind.
Sure.
And this is all based around your board gaming game night habits.
Sure.
All right, ready?
Yep.
First
Ready.
one, zombies or vampires?
Zombies.
The game you love, but you always lose.
I don't lose all the time. There is no game I lose at all the time. So next question.
Well, you should play with Tico then.
I'm also a winner.
That's good.
Deck builder or deck constructor?
Oh man, both. I am longtime tournament player for many different card games, and I love deck builder. I mean, if I had to pick one now, I'd probably just pick deck builder because I don't have time to do the deck construction that I used to.
I hear you.
So,
Favorite game mechanic?
favorite game mechanic. I mean, I like deck building a lot. I don't know if I guess I'll just go with deck building because I mean, it is a great mechanic.
That's fair. Okay. Game you always win, and since you always win, what's your favorite game that you always win?
Well, I don't always win. We have a pretty good group, but I don't. I definitely win my share. I really like Dune Imperium. I really like Rising Sun. Those are great competitive games, and I do pretty well with those.
All right. Worker placement or area control?
Area control.
What's your favorite classic game?
Classic, probably Twilight Imperium.
Okay.
That's a great game. We just never finished the game. We play it. We just eventually call it. Because it takes too long.
Fair enough. And final one, campaign or legacy?
Oh, campaign. I don't like Legacy at all.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Nope.
I don't know if I've ever spoke to someone who doesn't like legacy. I love legacy games.
Well,
So
it depends on your definition of legacy. I don't like destroying my components. If I don't like I like lasting effects. I don't like destroying my components
That's
or
fair.
having to buy a reset pack or anything like that. I don't like stickers or any of that stuff.
See, I love. So for me, the thing about legacy that I love is as having a playable game at the end that's unique to you and
Yeah.
your game, like the way you
Yeah,
played the
the
game.
permanence of the change.
The permanence of the
Yeah.
change. I love that because to me, a legacy game isn't just when you're done, you can't play it anymore. The whole point is you now have a customized version of that game. That
Yeah,
is,
that's a good point.
yeah. That's why I love legacy games. That is it. Before we let you go, Steve, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Finally meeting you after all this time. I've been talking to you
Right.
about this game since I think July of last year.
Right. Yep.
And so it's a long time coming, and I'm
Hmm.
excited to see you finally get it coming to Kickstarter
Oh man, me too.
March 1st. Um,
Mhm.
what do you really want people to know about this game? Why should they back the game?
Well, I mean, it's just if you like campaign games that are based around stealth missions, and where you get to choose your strategy. The game doesn't tell you how to play it. You get to decide how you play the game. And if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, this is going to be your game.
Awesome. So everybody go check it out. The link is in the description below. The Kickstarter starts March 1st. So go check that out. You're not going to be disappointed. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Thank you everybody for coming out and checking out the show here. Make sure you check out the Kickstarter on March 1st, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can get more content like this.